Introduction to Applied Linguistics. This is our first lecture, and we will begin this course with a little bit introduction to the course. The International Association of Applied Linguistics, which is abbreviated as ILA, that proclaims applied linguistics is an interdisciplinary field of research and practice dealing with practical problems of language and communication that can be identified, analyzed, or solved by applying very available theories, methods, or results of linguistics, or by developing new theoretical and methodological frameworks in linguistics to work on these problems. What is applied linguistics? It is actually an interdisciplinary field of research and practice. And what it deals with practical problems of language and communication. What kind of problems? Practical problems. Practical problems, the problems of our day-to-day life, of real-life situations related to language and communication. Those problems are identified, analyzed, and solved by applying either available theories or by developing new theoretical or methodological frameworks. The ILA definition is both broad in including potentially many different areas such as child language acquisition, language and communication disorders, multilingualism, language testing, communication in the workplace, and so on, and narrow in relating applied linguistics to linguistics proper. It is broad, that it includes a range of disciplines or a range of issues that it deals with, and narrow, that it relates applied linguistics to linguistics proper. First of all, let's discuss what is language. According to Ron McCauley, there are 7 ways of looking at language. Language is meaning, language is sound, as form, as communication, as identity, as history, as symbols. These are 7 ways that we look at language to analyze it further or to discuss it further. These can be summarized in 3 rather different conceptualizations of language. First of all, language as a particular representational system based on the biologically rooted language faculty. Second, language as a complex and historically evolved patterns of structures. And third, language as a social practice and a culturally loaded value system. So these are 3 major conceptualizations of language. Now coming to our next question, what is linguistics? The different conceptualizations of language that we studied in the previous slide, they lead us to very different methodological perspectives, which together constitute the field of linguistics. And some of the commonly occurring terms for different branches of linguistics are theoretical linguistics, formal linguistics, descriptive linguistics, historical linguistics, sociolinguistics, psycholinguistics, neurolinguistics, clinical, cognitive, forensic, and educational linguistics, computational linguistics, corpus linguistics, and geolinguistics. And this list of branches can go further by adding some sub-branches like phonetics and phonology, morphology, syntax, semantics, pragmatics, dialectology, discourse analysis, critical discourse analysis, stylistics, genre analysis, second language acquisition, and language pathology. It may be useful to look at the differences, but also similarities. Similarities are also equally important between these different kinds of linguistics in terms of relationship between the linguist who does the studying of language and the evidence that he or she uses for study, paying particular attention to how the evidence is collected and used in the analysis. So 3 things are important. Number 1, the linguist, the one who is doing the evidence the data or the problems. And third, paying particular attention to how that data or that evidence is collected or gathered for further analysis. The schematization of the various approaches helps to highlight the commonalities as well as differences between the various branches and sub-branches of linguistics. So how this evidence is gathered, as per difference in the collection of this evidence, the linguistics is divided into different branches. So this was discussed in the very first statement. The different conceptualizations of language lead to very different methodological perspectives, which together constitute the field of linguistics today. The field of linguistics, it contains all the different types of branches and sub-branches of linguistics. Coming on to applied linguistics, applied linguists may apply one specific approach from these to the problems they wish to solve, or be eclectic and use a combination of approaches that they can combine different approaches to serve their purpose. Applied linguists have applied theories and models from other disciplines beyond linguistics. Contemporary applied linguists, they feel free to draw on almost any field of human knowledge and use ideas from philosophy, education, sociology, feminism, Marxism, and media studies, to name a random few, or any other field of studies or field of knowledge. For example, they have explored psychological models such as declarative and procedural memory and emergentism, mathematical models such as dynamic systems theory or chaos theory, early Soviet theories of child development such as those of Vygotsky, French thinkers such as Foucault and Bourdieu, and so on. Ben Rampton, he described applied linguistics as an open field of interest in language. An open field of interest in language, while David Block, he called it as an amalgam of research interests. So what is the need and scope of applied linguistics? Applied linguistics is a theoretical term that covers interdisciplinary domain, as we discussed previously, in linguistics to solve real-world problems in the use of language in various contexts such as translation, literacy, language education and teaching, lexicography, and other which belong to the application of language. The scope of applied linguistics can be summarized as language and teaching and language and society. So, language and teaching, this scope covers the approaches and methods which are used in teaching second language. Language and society, which is also called sociolinguistics, and which studies the relationship between the society and language. It also answers some questions that emerge in the use of language in society. Language and education learning, these are some other scopes. There are some activities involved in this scope. They are first language education, additional language, second language, third or fourth language education, clinical linguistics, and language testing. Language work in law, that applied linguistics covers the studies of workplace communication, language planning, and forensic linguistics. This language and law combination is called forensic linguistics. Language information and effect, the other studies such as literary stylistics, CDA or critical discourse analysis, translation and interpretation, and information design belong to this scope. Linguistics and applied linguistics, a difficult relationship. This is our next topic. Linguistics and applied linguistics, a difficult relationship. How? Linguistics is the academic discipline concerned with the study of language in general, and in some degree is bound to represent an abstract idealization of language. One particularly influential type of idealization is that used in the generative linguistics by Noam Chomsky. The representation of language, we will study generative linguistics in later lectures. The representation of language in the mind, which is called competence, it's a concept given by Chomsky. The way in which people use language in everyday life, this is called performance, another concept of Chomsky, or Chomsky's generative linguistics. Chomsky's linguistics is not the only kind. We also have sociolinguistics. Sociolinguistics attempts to find systematic relationship between social groupings and contexts and the various ways in which languages are used. Then we have functional linguistics, and in functional linguistics, the concern is with language as a means of communication and how people actually use their language. That is, it deals with functions of language. Corpus linguistics looks for the frequencies and combinations in words that are not usually revealed by intuition. Applied linguistics is not simply a matter of matching up findings about language with pre-existing problems, but of using findings to explore how the perception of these might be changed. The methodology of applied linguistics must refer to findings and theories of linguistics, choosing among different schools and approaches and making these relevant to the problem in hand. At the same time, it must investigate and take into account the experience and needs of the people involved in the problem itself. It must then seek to relate to these two perspectives to each other, attempting perhaps in process to reformulate each perspective. Moreover, it must undertake investigation and theorization of its own. So there are two perspectives, two major perspectives that applied linguistics should deal with. The methodology of applied linguistics, it must refer to findings and theories of linguistics, choosing among different schools and approaches and making these relevant to the problems in hand. And second perspective, that it must investigate and take into account the experience and needs of people involved in the problem itself. So what is its next role? Its next role is to relate these two perspectives. Conceived of this way, applied linguistics is a quest for common ground. It establishes a reciprocal relationship between experience and expertise, between professional concerns with language problems and linguistics. So our next concern is applied linguistics as a problem-solving approach. While most applied linguists seem happy with the idea that their discipline is concerned, as Ayla proclaims, with practical problems of language and communication, the very term problem does raise issues of its own. In one sense, what is problem? What is meant by problem actually? In one sense, it means a research question posed in a particular discipline. In another sense, it is something that has gone wrong which can be solved or which can be corrected. Calling areas or topics problems fosters the attitude that there is something wrong with them. Applied linguists have to be clear that they are solving problems within an area of language use, not regarding the area itself as a problem, except in the research question sense. Language teaching, for example, is not itself a problem to be solved. It may nevertheless raise problems that applied linguists can resolve. So what problems does applied linguistics solve? So if you see and you are worried about your child's speech, you are more likely to go to a speech therapist than to an applied linguist. If your country is torn by civil war between people who use two scripts, you ask for a United Nations peacekeeping force. If you are drafting a new law, you go to a constitutional lawyer or a civil servant. The problem-solving successes of applied linguistics have included devising orthographies for languages that have no written form and inventing simplified languages for mariners. Applied linguistics have played a part in EU projects on translation and on linguistic diversity. Most successes have, however, had to do with language teaching, such as syllabuses and methods that swept the world from 70s onwards, particularly associated with the Council of Europe. At a general level, we can draw three implications from this. First, the applied linguist is a jack of all trades, and we will explain it later. The applied linguist is a go-between, not an enforcer, a servant, not a master. Sheer description of any area of language is not applied linguistics as such, but descriptive linguistics. So let's discuss them one by one. Real-world language problems can seldom be solved by looking at a single aspect of language. Since we know applied linguistics is interdisciplinary, the applied linguist is expected to know a little about many areas, not only of language but also of philosophy, sociology, computer programming, experimental design, and many more. In a sense, applied linguists are not only jacks of all trades but also master of none, as they do not require the in-depth knowledge of the specialized field but the ability to filter out ideas relevant to their concerns. An applied linguist who only does syntax or discourse analysis is an applied syntactician or an applied discourse analyst, not a member of the multidisciplinary applied linguistics profession. In other words, multidisciplinarity applies not just to the discipline as a whole, but also to the individual practitioner. So each individual practitioner or each individual linguist, in order to be called as applied linguist, or he must have an idea of various fields of human knowledge. The applied linguist is a go-between, not an enforcer, a servant, not a master. The problems that applied linguistics can deal with are complex and multifaceted. As consultants to other people, applied linguists can contribute their own interpretation and advice. But that is all that they can do. The client has to weigh in the balance all the other factors and decide on the solution, that if he is going to execute that solution or not. The linguist can only advise that solution. So we are taking an example here, that rather than saying you should follow this way of language teaching, the applied linguist advice would be you could try this way of language teaching and see whether it works for you. Alternatively, the applied linguist should be responding to problems put forward by language teachers, not determining what the problems are. He cannot predetermine the problems. He will only respond to the problems that are forwarded to him by language teachers. The applied linguist is there to serve teachers' needs, just like a garage mechanic interpreting the customer's vague idea of what is wrong with the car and putting it right, rather than being a car designer. Some areas concerned with the description of language are regarded as applied linguistics, others are not. Make a corpus analysis of an area or carry out a conversation analysis and you are doing applied linguistics. Describe children's language or vocabulary and it is first language acquisition. Make a description of grammar and you are doing syntax. Overall, making a description is not in itself solving a problem, even if it may contribute to the solution.